In this lesson, we'll start adding some decorators that show our smart devices in the viewer. To give a sneak peek of our decorators, these are the simple decorators that we'll be creating, a label hovering over each of our smart devices with the corresponding smart device IDs. So let's go back to our code. We'll start by creating a new directory called components. And within this directory, a new directory called decorators. Our file will be called smartDeviceDecorator.tsx. A decorator is an interface that is defined in package at Bentley iModel.js front end. So we'll start by importing that interface from at Bentley iModel.js front end. And this is the interface decorator that we will be importing. A small correction here. With the release of 3.0, our packages are no longer prefixed with @Bentley. The package should be called @iTwin.js/core-frontend. For future reference, all @Bentley packages will start with @iTwin instead from here onwards, and most iModel.js names will instead be replaced with core-. The decorator interface is basically just defining the types and functionalities for graphics that we'll be rendering in our viewport. We'll need to define our smart device decorator class and have this implement the interface. So smart device decorator here, and have this implements the decorator interface. Since the interface decorator forces us to implement the decorate function, just to get rid of this issue, we'll implement the decorate function that does nothing for now. In order to have our decorators start fetching attributes from our iModel, we need to declare a variable that is attached to our iModel connection. I'll call this private underscore iModel, and the type is the iModel connection. Without this, we can't query for the smart devices to attach our graphics to. Since we'll be attaching decorators to multiple elements, we'll also need another variable, an array of markers. I'll call this underscore marker set and declare the type as a marker array. The class marker is a type of decoration. In our case, we'll be using it as an HTML element. We'll learn more about markers in the next lesson. So now let's define our constructor to start initializing some variables. It will take the screen viewport class. This is where our iModel is contained in. And let's initialize some variables. The iModel will be set to the screen viewport iModel. This variable is needed again for the query, and initialize our marker set to be an empty array for now. Finally, in the constructor, let's add a call to this.addMarkers once the decorator has been initialized to populate the markers set. Now, defining our addMarkers function, a private async addMarkers. This should be an asynchronous function since we'll be performing a fetch to our iModel connection to gather the smart devices data. And the first thing we want to do here is find our smart devices. So I'll declare a values variable here that will get the smart device data. If you recall on how we hit our walls in chapter visualization, we can do the very same here by querying our digital twin. Now let's define our get smart device data function. We'll call it private async get smart device data. Again, this is asynchronous since we are doing a fetch on our iModel connection. We'll need to declare a const query defining the EC-SQL statement like the ones we've learned in chapter visualization, and only select two attributes that we're interested in for now. The smart device ID, which we'll use as our label, comma, and the origin, which tells us where to place these markers. This is going to be selecting from a schema named dgn custom item types underscore house schema under class smart device. This schema and house smart device class right here is predefined in the sample DGN file that was provided. And just to make sure we're placing markers in valid areas, we'll add a conditional where, checking if the origin is not null. We'll make a quick sanity check here just to make sure this is a valid EC SQL statement. Let's copy this and Alt-Tab to our iModel console. Open up our Smart House Digital Twin and paste the query. So you'll notice the results, we have exactly what we were looking for, the Smart Device ID as a label, and the origin telling us where to place the markers. So let's Alt-Tab back. Now we need to declare a results variable that will store the results from this.imodel.query, pass in our query that we just wrote. A small correction here. Query needs additional options where you'll need to specify the row format to use JS property names. This.imodel.query should be this.imodel.query query, undefined, the row format option specified to use JS property names. In the latest version, query returns an array instead of an object, so to keep this lesson consistent, we will specify the results to be returned with property names to access the data. And finally, a values array initialized to nothing. This is the values variable that we'll be returning in this function, and loop through our results. So for each row in our results, let's just push back into our values array, and finally just return the values. Now that we have our values stored from our getSmartDevice data in our query, let's start looping through them. Values.forEach value. We'll create a smart device marker for each value and instantiate this as a new marker. Again, marker is the type of decoration that we'll be using, and this takes two arguments, the first being an XYZ coordinate that locates the marker. So we'll declare the X value as the value.origin.x, the Y as the value.origin.y, and the Z as the value.origin.z. And the second parameter being the size of it, we'll just create a box for now with X of 50 pixel width and a Y of 50 pixel height. Now that we have our smart device markers, we need to create an HTML element to bind it to. So I'm going to create a very simple div element and have the inner HTML of this div element to be set to a simple header that will basically store the values smart device ID, our label. And then just attach the HTML element to our smart device marker by setting HTML element to the HTML element we just declared. We'll finally populate our marker set variable by pushing up the smart device marker into the array. And that should be it for the function, and have both of our variables now filled. The last step we need to do is complete our decorate function, and it needs to take one parameter called the context parameter of type decorate context. This is the context telling where to decorate our markers to. And in this decorate function, we simply loop through our marker set. For each marker, we will simply add the marker decoration to the context. Our file is now finally completed, but we haven't initialized this yet in the app.tsx, our main entry. So what we need to do is import our smart device decorator class from target our components, decorators, smart device decorator file, and have the smart device decorator class imported. And finally, on iModel connected, initialize our decorators. So we will call iModel app dot view manager dot add decorator, our new smart device decorator, again calling the instructor, and it only takes one parameter, the screen viewport, to attach our iModel to. Now we just save our files, let hot module reload, compile our program. I'll tab back to our viewer browser, and you'll notice immediately our new decorators that are bound to each smart device in our house digital twin. So right now you can see that they're pretty ugly, and in the next lesson we'll be customizing and making these markers much better.